So I love it when I come across a new artist and I'm absolutely blown away by their creativity. You know, when people bring together a blend of all these different influences to come up with a unique sound or a unique style. And whenever I hear that, I always think about these artists really must know their true self and must have done a lot of work on themselves to discover their individuality. And today's guest on Creativity Uncovered has done just that, and I really want to find out more about how they came up with their unique sound. So hello and welcome. My name is Abby Gatling, and I'm on a journey to uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive, and open their imagination. Basically, I want to find out how people find creative solutions and then how they use these at home, work, play, and everything in between. And my goal for the podcast is that by the end of it, you will be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. And today I'm super excited to be speaking with crooner hip hop artist all the way from Seattle, Jacob Marquez. Hello.
Hey, how's it going? I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, I love it when I speak to people internationally because I'm just constantly having to pinch myself and think, oh, it's such a great connector having this podcast. I get to speak about creativity and meet cool people from across the globe. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I can only imagine what cool people, creative endeavors you've come across. I've only been able to listen to a couple of the episodes, but I'll be sure to go back listen to all the other ones.
Ah, wonderful. Yeah, there are some real crackers in there. So, and I'm
Okay.
sure that this one will be too. I'm very keen to talk to you. So you are a musician. You go by the name of Jay Henry. Um,
Right.
and I want to talk about your music and your inspiration. But before we do that, what is crooner hip hop? I need to know.
Yeah. Great question. So crooner hip hop, it was actually coined by my husband after he listened to the first half of my album. It's essentially just hip hop with a very strong flavor of crooner, jazz, or music, right? So, um, very inspired by Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, even Ella Fitzgerald, and some of these very traditional, early 1900s jazz singers that we kind of all know and love at this point in time.
Yes, I love that. I mean, it is such an interesting combination of sounds. I listened to your new album, like your debut album that's just come out, Love Jane Henry, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I was just thinking and was going, there's so many layers. There are so many layers to this and so many different influences. Definitely, I heard the jazz. I heard a lot of strings as well.
Mhm.
Uh, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Hamilton almost, you know, the musical.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. He Lin Manuel, I forget his full name, but obviously a huge inspiration just because of I don't know, he created his own lane with his own sound and his own take on musicals, a very traditional concept, especially nowadays. And he said, you know what, I'm gonna do it slightly differently. That's a little bit more authentically me, but still tells the story, and I think really captivates an audience. So definitely, there's a tad of that in Love J. Henry as well.
I think that by bringing in all these different influences, you're kind of expanding the reach for your music because it's, you know, it's not just straight down the line hip hop. It's actually got all these other um, markers of other styles of music in there that will appeal to different people. Tell me, how did you come up with that as your style in the first place? Like, has this been an iterative process, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think with anything, it's always about iteration and really exploration at the end of the day, right? You know, I think my answer to that is very multi-layered. And the first layer is a lot of the reasons why I struggled to really pursue music in the first place was a sense of other when it comes to the hip hop community, and just music in general. You know, whether was I wasn't a true musician, or I was gay, and hip hop is or historically has been very homophobic and misogynistic and things of that nature. And I think it definitely is changing with the likes of Lil Nas X and some of these other queer hip hop artists that are coming out, and the rise of female hip hop artists as well, which has been super cool to see. Um, but early on in my exploration of wanting to pursue any sort of musical endeavor, that always kind of was in the back of my mind and really stopped me from putting my foot into that world. As you grow older, I think you kind of get over a lot of those hangups across life in general. And that's a blessing in a lot of ways, right? Because it allows you to say, well, if I'm already different, if I'm already outside of the norm of what is generally accepted within this community, I might as well just explore what authentically feels like me, if it means, saying things in a different way or saying them over different types of music.
Yes. So, was there a point in time where you thought you wanted to pursue music, but these other factors were holding you back? Was that holding you back from practicing music or wanting to go public with your music, or what? Like, well, how did that play out?
Probably a mixture of both. I mean, so I'm 33 now, right? And I've had a dream of creating an album since I was 15, maybe slightly before then, right? It's always been in the back of my mind. I've always been fascinated by artists and music and behind the scenes, and you know, the process of that creative effort. Um, so yeah, definitely all those things that I mentioned hindered me from pursuing music publicly. Now I had a couple of songs that I would put out, or I would, make songs for my friends, and they would say, "Oh, it's really good." But in the back of my mind, I was like, "Well, you're my friend, right? You're supposed to say that."
Yeah.
Um, so it hindered me from sharing publicly, but then at some point, it also just hindered me from pursuing at all, because um, I felt like there wasn't really a place for me in it.
Right. So you never considered that music might be something that you'd want to do as a career, because you've gone down a different career path, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I definitely considered it, but so um, in high school, I wanted to be an audio engineer.
Oh, okay.
I even built a sound booth in my tiny bedroom. I don't know what my dad was thinking letting me do this, but a literal sound booth. Um, and it took up like half of my bedroom. So I always had the thought of, oh, I really want to dive into this world and pursue this career path. Um, but yeah, once I got to college, I grew up I grew up very poor. And so, mitigating the risk of continuing to be poor kind of took over. And I said, I'm going to go pursue a different career path.
Yeah, okay. So a stable career path and keeping your music on the side. Is that how you want to keep it at the moment? Is it nice having it as a separate thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's I think my answer to that question changes depending on the day, you know. Um but that's kind of generally my take on anything that I'm doing in life. I mean, even my full-time professional, air quotes for the listeners, professional career. There's some days I'm like, I don't even know if I want to pursue this for the rest of my life, right? Um, I kind of just want to pursue everything and have my hand in like all these different worlds and be able to switch between them whenever I feel like that's what's going to satiate my appetite at that point in time, whether it's I really want to do something technical or I really want to do something creative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you say that uh, you're interested in all these multiple different things and you want to participate in all of them. But that's basically your music, right? Like you haven't said, I'm going to stay with this one genre. I'm going to bring in a bit of jazz and a bit of hip hop and a bit of Vivaldi or whatever. It's you're
Yeah.
kind of playing that out in your music. That's really cool.
Yeah. I think it's just more authentic, right? I mean, there's definitely some people where they know their lane, or they have a lane and they stay to it, and that's just who they want to be and who they are, and that's great. But um, from my experience and just conversations I've had, I think it's more common, and I definitely ascribe to that as well, to say, yeah, I kind of feel like jazz today, or I kind of feel like Kanye West Yeezus today, or I kind of feel like um, country. Beyonce just made a country album, right? So there's nothing to say that you have to stick into one genre.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that when artists are they are spreading across multiple genres, I often wonder, like, are the streaming platforms and things like that actually keeping up with that? Because you actually have to nominate yourself in one, really.
Hmm.
It's not kind of um accurate to how music is progressing, it seems.
Yeah, and I think these streaming platforms are going to have to account for that in their algorithms. I mean, as a data scientist, I know exactly what kind of pain they're probably going through in terms of like how do they make sure this algorithm is, one, accurate, two, reflecting the artist themselves, and three, reflecting what the listener wants, right? And multi-genre artists are just kind of the way a lot of musical artists are going now, right?
Mm.
Which I think is fantastic. Um, but to your point, that's really going to stress out Spotify or Apple Music, these algorithms that really want you to be just a hip hop artist or be just a country artist or what have you. Because that helps with the classification of the data and flowing through the pipelines and all that. So I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see what they do, but they're going to have to do something.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that like your regular job is in data science. Does this have any influence in the way that you approach your music or the way you think about your music?
Mm, yeah, definitely. I think everything in life influences other things, right? In small or major ways. So, data science and just my professional career in data definitely influences my music. I think a tangible way is the way I use data to make decisions about social media, what kind of things I'm posting, or playlists, like what playlists am I going to go pursue, right? Just because I have data um, that kind of gives me a little bit more information about what kind of music they look for, or types of artists that they generally put on their playlists and stuff like that. So I try to be very data driven when it comes to more like business decisions of my music. Um, I'd say when it comes to the actual musicality or the artistry or creativity of my music, it's a little less explicit about how it's influencing it. But I would say that the way that occurs is the way I see music is the way I see data, right? At its core, what you're doing is you're trying to identify patterns that fit really well together to create something beautiful or create something useful, or, create something. Um, and so I'd say all my time in the data world and really sharpening that capability of identifying patterns helps out in the music world to some extent, right? Um, or at least gets me started. And then at that point, the creativity has to take over, right? And the authenticity has to shine.
Yeah. I love that you're sort of straddling these two worlds and they come together at points. Just hearing your approach to, yeah, looking at the trends and stuff like that on Spotify and things like that. It's interesting. Is I think as a business owner, I feel like I have to wear 1,000 different hats. I do work in marketing, but I also have to do accounting and all these other bits and pieces.
Hmm.
And musicians have to do the same too. You basically have to treat yourself as a business. and
Yeah.
you're having to stray into marketing of yourself. How is it? How is it managing those like different roles within your music?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging. Um, I I will fall back on a previous answer where I said like I love dabbling in a bunch of different things. So
Mhm.
on one hand, I really enjoy it, right? Because on any day I can be the creative, or I can dive into marketing and like what does it take to really um, promote a musician and artist, aka myself, on social media, or what is PR, and like how do I really start to understand that a little bit more. When you're a small business or an independent artist, there's no ending to the amount of learning that you can do, right? But anyone that's been in business for X amount of time also knows that that's not very scalable. So at some point, you really have to understand, well, what are the things I truly love doing? And what are the things that I need to offload to someone else, right? Whether that's a friend that's really down for the cause and they want to help out in some way, or for equity of your music, right? Like there's a bunch of fascinating ways that you can cut deals now, as an independent artist, or you pay someone, right, upfront. Um, so that's kind of how I've been thinking about managing it recently. Um, and I've also been thinking about, putting on my technical side again. Like, how do I build tools for other independent artists who are in the same boat that really helps them scale themselves and expedite a lot of this process that I had to go through myself. So that's kind of a creative endeavor that I'm thinking about right now, but more technical creativity.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, you've done the hard yards. You've gone over these hurdles. It's
Yeah.
wonderful that you're thinking about how you can share that with other musicians.
Yeah, I mean, in the engineering world, there's this concept of open source, right? There's open source tooling, which generally just means anyone in the community can use it. Now, sometimes there's rules around what you can and can't use it for, but um, it really is a great place or repository of these tools that you can just get started on things, right? And I think um, it'd be pretty amazing to start seeing that in other fields like music, like small businesses, just because I haven't seen it as much outside of engineering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I feel like in a lot of industries there's almost like gatekeeping of some of these things. It's like
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
had to figure it out, or I can charge you for it, so I don't want to share my knowledge with you for free.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how that would actually look. Like as a bit of a game plan for independent artists or something like that.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. But you're right. There definitely feels to be a lot more gatekeeping um, in this side of the world. uh, In this world, not this side of the world, not like in Seattle.
Yeah.
Um, versus in engineering, in tech. I don't know. I mean, they have gatekeeping of their own kind, but when it comes to like tooling, there's less of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. The when we spoke the last time, you mentioned that you like to use your music as a bit of a platform. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So again, going back to one of my previous answers, right? I think I was hindered of expressing my true self because of all these preconceived notions of what hip hop is, of what music is, of my place in those worlds. Um, and again, as I've grown older, I've really started to understand that visibility is super important, right? Especially as you start thinking about a legacy that you're trying to leave, or even just as an example that you're trying to lead um, for younger generations. I have two nieces and a nephew, right? And I think about them all the time when I make decisions about, am I going to be authentic or am I not going to be authentic? And I always choose to be authentic because I want them to be, right? I want them to feel comfortable of who they are and be their true selves in whatever situation they're in. And so I just applied that to my music, especially with this album, coming to the point of I want to share my authentic self, my queerness, my technical nerdy side, my side that wants to do big band jazz while rapping on top of it, right? Like all these different things that I can't be the only one that appreciates those things or that feels that way or identifies as that thing. Um, and so, yeah, I use music as a way to essentially say, like, I want to cultivate this space or at least start it and bring like-minded people together around this sound or this concept or this feeling. And really it's that feeling, like this human emotion around love, loss, everything in between. And yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's the end of that answer without rambling on more.
I love it. I think because when I was listening to your album, you know, as I said before, there's a depth because there is so there's so many influences that are playing there, like just auditorily, but there's a depth in terms of the concepts that are actually being covered throughout the album. So tell me what your new album is all about.
Yeah. So my new album, debut album, Love J. Henry, is a concept album that goes through the journey of self discovery through a medium of love, right? And so, myself, the protagonist, is a hopeless romantic, and you hear that from the very first song, who falls in love with the man of their dreams, the person of their dreams, and feels all the emotions that come with that, including very deep romance, lust as well, but also anger when there's deceit or a lack of trust or what have you. And then ultimately trying to figure out who they are and what's their part and what are some of the things that they need to work on themselves, including self-love, through all those experiences, right? So it's a very tight creative vision. It's only 11 tracks, um, which describes 8 years of my relationship with my husband, and all the experiences that I had, or at least the most important ones through that time.
Yeah, wow. So it's kind of like, was it a cathartic sort of experience being able to produce that?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I was actually kind of depressed at the end of it
Oh, that it was
because,
over? Or-
yeah, that it was over. Yeah. Um, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but there's just like this excitement as you're crafting it and um I don't know, this energy about it, and then you kind of deliver it or you perform it for the first time. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I guess it's done now. And a lot of it was all about how much I love my husband and how much I love just being in love and um self-discovery of myself. And it felt like once it was out there, those those feelings didn't go away, but um, they weren't at the same magnitude as they were when I was crafting all these songs. Um, so yeah, it's a very interesting feeling,
uh,
but yeah.
yeah, I definitely have that. When I'm looking forward to something that the post blues, you're like, oh darn, I was looking forward to that so much.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
but I guess like now you get the opportunity to view other people experiencing this thing that you've created. Is that, I mean, based on what the album is about, is that kind of
Mhm.
nerve wracking because it's quite personal?
Mm, no,
Oh,
not at
okay.
all. Yeah, not at all. Um, I think so. I tend to be a very vulnerable, open person. And so, and I do that because I think visibility is important. And I think sharing that you're human is important. And I think, shame is cultivated in the loneliness of a feeling. when you feel like you're the only one that has that experience or feels that thing. And the second half of the album is all about sharing, like, oh, I went through some shit in my relationship. I'm not sure if I could cuss on this. You can bleep it out if you want, but I was super excited for people to hear that. And I hope that I deliver it in such a way that somebody else can grab onto something like, oh, I've also felt that struggle. And hopefully it starts a conversation, right? So I'd say that's the first part. No, I think that's the only part. Never mind.
Yeah.
I lost my second train of thought, but I think that's my complete answer.
Yeah. I was like, oh, there is more. This is deep, very deep. But is that what you hope people get out of listening to this album? Is that sort of maybe shared sense of shared experience or connection?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think that's a great way to summarize it, to extend on it. I hope people realize two things. One, loving yourself is very difficult, but worth it, right? And two, loving someone else is very difficult, but worth it. I think those are the two things. And the way the album is sequenced, it's meant to be very cyclical. As soon as you finish it, it's meant to be re-listened to, because the second time around, there's different sides of the prism that sort of unveil themselves in terms of the character, in terms of the storyline, the songs themselves, especially the first song, When. It's meant to be looked at different angles and understood differently depending on where you're at in the story. Um, and not to be too like artsy, but I think love is the same way, right? It's meant to be looked at different angles and understood based on certain context and what have you. And each time you understand it a little bit more, it strengthens the emotion, and I think it makes it more valuable.
Yes. Okay. So new things can crop out at you each time you listen to it. Uh, what is your hope for the future of your music, or what are your plans? Where do you want to take this? You've put 8 years of your feelings into one album. Is it going to be eight
Yeah,
years to the next one, or do you think there's going to be a completely different concept for the next one, or do you want to do a next one?
I do want to do a next one. Yeah. Hopefully not 8 years, although, one thing about creativity, as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know, it's all about patience. You can't rush creativity. And if you try to, it won't come out as authentic as you or should have, or you want it to. Um, and I learned that a lot during this process of creating this album. It took me 2 years to write this storyline, and arguably it took me 8 years, right? Um, and so hopefully not 8 years, but I definitely have a concept for the next one. It's going to be an extension of the character in the first one, so myself, right? But it's going to be a different side of the story and a little bit more background and exploring myself through other relationships in my life, mainly family. But for this album, to be completely honest, I wrote it to be turned into a play. So
Oh,
it, yeah, it actually was craft. So the catalyst for the album was actually a play I wrote for my wedding. And I loved that process so much that I said, I kind of want to take that concept and turn it into a full-fledged album. So all the little skits in the album are actually from the video recording of the play that was performed at my wedding, which I wrote. And so I want to turn this album into a play. So kind of going back to its original form.
oh wow. Okay, so multimodal. I love it.
Yeah.
That's so good. And you sort of mentioned before about you don't want to have, pressure to write the next one. And I think I sort of asked you before, do you want to keep your music on the side or integrate it into your career? But I actually think that having it sitting alongside your regular income and all that sort of stuff, you kind of can keep a lot of stress out of your
Hmm.
craft in that way.
Hmm.
There's no pressure to continue to deliver. You work at your own pace and when it feels right and when the creativity flows for you. So I think that's kind of a special thing.
Yeah, I would totally agree. It's very rare that professional artists can still have that lack of pressure, right? Maybe independent artists, but I think at some point, even as an independent artist, there's pressure to deliver because it's kind of like your livelihood at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Ah, well, fantastic. I will pop the link to your album in our show notes so people can have a listen to it. And I'm sure they'll reach out if they have thoughts on it or want to unpack it a little bit more with you. But thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story today. It was really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, of course. Again, thanks for having me. And yeah, if anyone's listening, listens to the album, feel free to reach out. Um, share your thoughts, comments, concerns, disgruntlements. Hopefully more of the former and less of the latter, but I'm open to that as well. If it's too crazy, I'll just turn it into a funny video and post it on my Instagram.
Okay, so mostly reach out if you're gruntled. If you're disgruntled, stay away for fear of
Yeah,
being shamed online.
exactly.
I don't even know if gruntled is a thing, but disgruntled.
Yeah, we made it a thing.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I'm coining that. But I also want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned into Creativity Uncovered today. I really appreciate you lending me your ears. And I want to know if this episode has inspired you. If this episode or another conversation that we've had has inspired you, I'd love for you to reach out because I always love to know the impact and hear about what people are doing in their creative lives. So, yeah, until next time, take care. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.